hadn't planned on going hunting that weekend. My son had called late Thursday night, apologetic and rushed, telling me he couldn't make it. Something about a last-minute group project and a deadline he couldn't ignore. I'd understood, of course. College work came first. Still, I felt a pang of disappointment. Those hunting trips were our tradition. Quiet weekends where the world slowed down, where we could sit by the fire and share the kind of conversations fathers and sons rarely found time for during the year. I'd resigned myself to staying home when the knock came at my door Friday afternoon. When I opened it, there he was, my son's best friend, standing on my porch like he owned the place, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and that easy grin on his face. "Trip still on, right?" he asked, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Your boy said he couldn't come, but he told me not to let you cancel. Said you needed the fresh air." I blinked at him, momentarily caught off guard. His confidence always did that to me, disarmed me. He wasn't a kid anymore, though I still caught myself thinking of him as the lanky teenager who used to raid our fridge after baseball practice. Now, at 22, he stood tall, broad-shouldered, with an energy that filled the space around him. His jaw had sharpened with adulthood, his smile mischievous, his eyes steady. Part of me wanted to say no, to claim the trip had been a father-son ritual, not something to share with anyone else. But he tilted his head, smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, and for reasons I couldn't quite explain, I found myself nodding. "All right," I said slowly, pretending to be reluctant. "If you're sure you're up for it. It's not all fun out there. You'll be up before dawn, hauling gear, sitting in silence for hours." He laughed, that bright, careless sound. "I can handle silence. Besides, you'll need someone to keep you company, right?" Something about the way he said it, playful, teasing, settled in my chest differently than it should have. I pushed the thought away as quickly as it came. He was my son's friend. He was practically family. That line wasn't just invisible. It was carved in stone. Still, I couldn't ignore the way his eyes lingered on mine as he stepped past me into the house, carrying the faint scent of cologne and campfire smoke that clung to his clothes. We loaded the truck together, his energy filling the quiet spaces I usually preferred before a trip. He cracked jokes, nudged me about packing too much food, teased me when I double-checked the cooler. "Relax," he said, flashing me that grin again. "It's not a survival mission, it's just a weekend. You act like we're trekking across the Yukon." I rolled my eyes but couldn't hide my smile. He had a way of loosening me, of drawing me out of myself. It was dangerous, that charm. I reminded myself it was harmless. Just a young man being friendly. Nothing more. The drive out to the cabin was filled with the kind of conversation that danced on the edge of familiarity. He asked about my work, about my plans for the winter, about things my own son never thought to ask. And when I returned the questions, he answered easily, leaning back in the seat, his voice low and steady, occasionally punctuated by that soft laugh that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. I tried not to notice the way his thigh brushed against mine when we hit a bump in the road. I told myself it was nothing, just the truck, just bad suspension. But when he didn't shift away, I became acutely aware of the warmth radiating from him, of how close we were in the cab, of how much effort it took to keep my eyes on the road. At the cabin, he moved with the confidence of someone who belonged there. He grabbed firewood without being asked, stacked it neatly, then came back with that same playful smirk. "Bet I can get the fire started faster than you," he challenged. "You think so?" I raised an eyebrow, half amused, half wary. "I know so," he said, crouching by the hearth. His hands worked quickly, skillful and sure, and when the flames finally caught, he turned to me with a grin that felt like a small victory parade. "Told you." I shook my head, pretending to be unimpressed, though the truth was I couldn't look away from him. Something about the way he carried himself, so at ease, so unafraid of the quiet between us, unnerved me. Later, as we settled in with beers, he stretched out across the old leather couch, one arm slung casually over the back. His eyes locked on mine in a way that felt almost deliberate. I tried to focus on the television, on the weather report murmuring in the background, but my thoughts drifted. This is ridiculous, I told myself. He's my son's friend. He's too young. This is nothing. Just a trip. Just two guys in the woods. But the spark was already there, undeniable, flickering in the corners of my mind where logic couldn't reach. And when he caught me watching him and smiled, slow, teasing, like he knew something I didn't, I realized that maybe, just maybe, this weekend was going to be more complicated than I had imagined. The forest always had a way of silencing me. Not in an uncomfortable way, but in the kind of way that stripped the noise of the world back to its bones, leaving only the wind threading through branches, the crunch of boots on pine needles, and the far-off call of a crow. By the time we'd hiked out past the cabin, gear slung over our shoulders, I could already feel the old familiar calm settling in. He walked a step ahead of me, carrying the rifle case with ease, his stride steady, shoulders loose, as if he'd been making this trek his whole life. My son never moved like that. He was careful, cautious, the type to second-guess his footing. But his friend? He walked like the woods belonged to him, like every snapping twig was part of some rhythm only he could hear. I adjusted my pack, more to distract myself than out of discomfort, and caught him glancing back at me with a grin. "You sure you're not slowing down in your old age?" he teased. I snorted. "Old age? Please. I've been doing this since before you were born." "Exactly my point." He winked, and though it was meant as a joke, the way his gaze lingered on me made my chest tighten. We trudged deeper, and the trees grew taller, shadows stretching like long fingers across the ground. The air smelled of earth and pine, damp and rich, the kind of scent that clings to your clothes long after you leave. When we stopped to take a break, he dropped his pack, pulled out a small bag of trail mix, and offered it to me. His hand brushed mine as he passed it over. Barely a touch, maybe even an accident, but it sent a ripple through me I hadn't felt in years. I pulled back a little too quickly, pretending to be preoccupied with scanning the treeline. "You brought snacks? Didn't figure you for the type. I like to be prepared." His mouth curved into a half-smile. "Besides, sharing's more fun." I didn't answer right away. My throat felt dry. He was just being friendly, I told myself. That's all it was. But when his eyes flicked over me, steady and knowing, I wasn't sure if I believed it. We kept moving until we found a clearing where the sun cut through the trees in golden beams, warm against the chill of early autumn. We set our packs down and began setting up. He was efficient, laying out the rifles, checking the ammo, adjusting the scope on one of the guns. I crouched beside him, and when he handed me a box of shells, his fingers grazed mine again. Slower this time, intentional, or at least it felt that way. "Careful," he said quietly, though the smile tugging at his lips betrayed the seriousness in his tone. "Don't want you shooting me instead of a deer." "Trust me?" I muttered, forcing myself to focus on loading the magazine. "I know what I'm doing. I don't doubt it." His voice dropped, softer, almost a murmur. "You look like the type who always knows what he's doing." I froze for half a second, unsure how to respond, and he chuckled, as if to cut the tension. But the words hung there, heavy, pressing into me. The rest of the afternoon passed in a rhythm of waiting. Hunting is mostly patience. Hours of stillness punctuated by moments of quick action. We sat near the tree line, rifles across our laps, the campfire smoldering gently behind us. Conversation started light. Sports, weather, things we could toss back and forth without much thought. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, it shifted. He asked me if I'd ever thought about moving away, about starting fresh somewhere else. He asked if I ever regretted staying in the same small town for most of my life. His questions were disarming, too direct, too personal. I answered carefully, but his interest didn't waver. At one point, he leaned closer, his shoulder brushing mine as he reached to adjust my grip on the rifle. "Relax," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. "You're too tense. Loosen your hands, let it rest against you. Hunting's not about force, it's about patience." The advice was sound, but the closeness rattled me. My pulse quickened, not because of the deer we might spot, but because of the heat radiating off his body, the casual intimacy of the gesture. I tried to laugh it off. I've been hunting longer than you've been alive, you know? Then maybe I'm just a fast learner. His lips quirked. Or maybe you're slipping. He sat back then, but not before giving my arm a playful pat. Too light to be serious, too lingering to ignore. I stared straight ahead, pretending to focus on the woods, but my thoughts were tangled. Was he just being friendly? Teasing the way young men do? Or was there something else there? Something I wasn't imagining? The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the clearing. The crackle of the fire behind us filled the silence, and every so often, I caught him watching me out of the corner of my eye. Not staring, not obvious, but enough to make me wonder. At one point, he caught me looking back. Instead of looking away, he smiled. Slow, deliberate, as though he knew exactly what effect it would have. I cleared my throat, shifted in my seat. You're awfully confident for a guest. He shrugged. Maybe I just like the company. I wanted to ask what he meant by that. Wanted to push to see if there was more hiding behind those words. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I looked out into the trees, watching the last streaks of sunlight fade, and felt the tension curl tighter inside me. The woods had gone quiet, but in that silence, I heard everything. The thud of my own heartbeat, the unspoken weight between us, the question I didn't dare voice. Was this just a hunting trip? Or was it something more? By the time the last streaks of sunlight drained from the sky, the woods were wrapped in a hush that felt ancient. The fire we built cracked and popped in the pit, sparks spiraling upward into the darkness like fireflies that didn't know when to quit. I sat back in the old folding chair, boots stretched toward the warmth, a beer in my hand. Across from me, he sprawled on a log, leaning back with one arm braced behind him, the firelight painting his face in gold and shadow. It should have been comfortable, the kind of evening I'd had countless times before. A man, a fire, a drink, silence between words. But it wasn't. The quiet didn't settle. It hummed. Every glance, every shift, every breath felt sharper than it should. He cracked open another beer and slid it across the ground toward me with the toe of his boot. Here, he said, grinning. You're drinking too slow. Can't let you fall asleep on me yet. I smirked, bent to grab it. You think I can't keep up? Oh, I know you can't, he teased, taking a long pull from his bottle before lowering it with a satisfied sigh. But that's okay. Someone's gotta stay sharp out here. I chuckled, shaking my head. You're all talk. That's what makes me fun, he shot back, eyes gleaming in the firelight. The banter was easy, too easy. It was the kind of rhythm we slipped into without thinking, but tonight it felt different. Like every word was laced with something unsaid. We talked about work, about hunting trips past, about music he liked that I'd never heard of. Then, without warning, the conversation tilted. So, he said, tossing a small stick into the fire and watching it spark, you ever regret not dating more? The question caught me off guard. I shifted in my chair, frowning slightly. That's a strange thing to ask. Not really, he shrugged. I mean, people talk about the one that got away, or how they wasted their 20s. You ever feel like that? I hesitated. It wasn't the kind of question I usually entertained. But the firelight, the beer, the way his gaze lingered, it pulled honesty out of me. I guess, sometimes, life gets busy. Responsibilities pile up. You make choices, and before you know it, a lot of years are behind you. He nodded slowly, as if turning that over. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the flames. I haven't really dated. Not seriously. I blinked. Really? Really? He said, voice softer now. A few things here and there, but nothing real. No one I really wanted. There was weight in those words. Not self-pity, not shame, just truth. He didn't look at me when he said it, but I felt the meaning brush against me like a hand. No one he really wanted. My throat tightened. I could have said it then. Could have told him the truth that had been clawing at me since the moment he smiled on my porch. That I wanted him. That I didn't care how wrong or complicated it seemed. But the words stuck. Instead, I took a sip of beer, forced my eyes away from him, and muttered something safe. You're still young. You'll find someone. He laughed under his breath, low and amused. You sound like my mom. That made me smile despite myself. I'll take that as an insult. Good, he said, grinning at me now, his teeth catching the glow of the fire. You're too serious all the time, always careful with your words, always measured. It's like you're afraid to let loose. I'm not afraid. I shot back a little too quickly. He tilted his head, eyes locking with mine. Aren't you? The challenge in his voice sent a jolt through me. For a long moment, neither of us looked away. The fire popped, a log shifting and collapsing inward, sending up a flurry of sparks. Still, we held each other's gaze, the silence thick and charged. I could see every detail of his face, the curve of his cheekbones, the faint scar near his eyebrow, the way his lips quirked just slightly as if he knew exactly what he was doing to me. I swallowed hard, dragging my eyes back to the fire. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? He murmured. The quiet after that wasn't the easy kind anymore. It was the kind that made my skin buzz, that made me too aware of every movement, every breath. He leaned back on his hands again, but his gaze never left me. I could feel it, warm as the flames, pressing against me until I thought I might burst. I almost said it. The words almost slipped out. I like you. They burned at the back of my throat, desperate to be freed. But fear shoved them back down. Fear of what it would mean, of rejection, of crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Instead, I took another drink, the beer bitter and flat on my tongue. You should get some sleep, I muttered, my voice rougher than I meant. We've got an early morning. He didn't argue, but when he stood, stretching lazily, the firelight traced the lines of his body in a way that made me look away too quickly. He dropped his empty bottle into the crate, then leaned down close enough that I caught the faint scent of soap and smoke clinging to his shirt. You're not fooling me, he whispered, almost too soft to hear. Before I could react, he smirked, straightened, and disappeared into the cabin, leaving me alone with the fire, my racing pulse, and the words I couldn't bring myself to say. The alarm dragged me out of sleep before the sun had even thought about rising. The cabin was still cloaked in darkness, the air inside cool enough that I could see my breath as I dressed. The floorboards creaked under my boots, and for a moment, I thought I was the only one awake, until I stepped into the main room. He was already there, leaning against the counter, a mug of coffee in his hand, hair still damp from washing his face. He looked up at me and grinned, soft and unguarded in the half-light. Morning, he said quietly. Didn't think you'd actually get up on time. I smirked, tugging on my jacket. I've been doing this a long time. Don't doubt me. He chuckled, took one last sip, and set the mug down. Then let's see what the woods have for us today. We stepped outside into the chill, rifles slung across our shoulders, packs strapped tight. The sky was a deep indigo, the first hints of dawn just beginning to press against the horizon. Frost glittered faintly on the grass, crunching beneath our boots as we moved toward the treeline. The woods swallowed us quickly, branches heavy with dew, the silence so complete that even the smallest sound seemed amplified. But beneath that quiet lay something louder, something that pressed between us as insistently as the fog curling along the ground. Tension. It clung to me like the cold, every step reminding me of the night before, of his words, his gaze, the way he leaned in so close. We found a spot overlooking a clearing and settled in. He crouched beside me, laying his rifle across his lap. For a while, we just watched the forest wake up. The world shifted gradually. Birds calling to each other, the rustle of squirrels in the brush, the light spilling slowly through the canopy. Hunting is patience. You wait, you listen, you breathe with the earth until you almost forget yourself. But I couldn't forget myself. Not with him this close, not with the way his arm brushed mine when he adjusted his scope, not with the warmth of his body seeping through the space between us. At one point, he leaned toward me, voice low. You're holding too stiff. I frowned. What? The rifle. His tone was steady, but I caught the flicker of amusement in his eyes. You're locking up your shoulder. You'll throw your aim. I opened my mouth to argue. I'd been hunting longer than he'd been alive, but before I could, he shifted behind me. Settling so close I felt his chest press lightly against my back. "Here," he murmured, his breath brushing my ear. His hands slid over my arms, guiding them gently, adjusting the rifle until it rested more naturally. "See? Relax into it. Let the weight do the work." The lesson was sound. But it wasn't the rifle I felt anymore. It was him, his hands steady on mine, his body pressed close, his voice a whisper that sent a shiver racing down my spine. I swallowed hard, struggling to steady my breathing. "You seem to know a lot about this." He chuckled softly, his lips close enough that I felt the warmth of it against my cheek. "Maybe I just know how to pay attention." The words weren't about hunting. Not the way he said them. I froze, the rifle forgotten in my hands. My pulse pounded so loud I was sure it would scare every creature in the forest away. His presence wrapped around me. Solid, warm, undeniable. If I turned my head even slightly, my lips would brush his. The thought struck me like lightning, dangerous and exhilarating. I started to move, the decision trembling in the space between us, when a sharp rustle snapped the moment apart. A deer burst into the clearing, head high, muscles taut, frozen for a split second in the pale light. "Go!" he whispered urgently, still behind me, guiding the barrel toward the animal. I raised the rifle, but my hands were unsteady. Not from nerves of the hunt, but from the storm raging inside me. My finger hovered near the trigger, but the shot never came. The deer bounded away in a blur of muscle and shadow, vanishing into the trees before I could even think to squeeze. "Damn," he muttered, stepping back finally, the warmth of him leaving me colder than the morning air. He gave me a sideways glance, smirking. "Guess you were a little distracted." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, lowering the rifle slowly. "Something like that," I admitted, my voice rough. He studied me for a moment, eyes sharp, unreadable. Then he smiled again, softer this time, almost secretive. "Don't worry, there's always another chance." I wasn't sure if he meant the deer or something else entirely. We sat back down, the silence stretching between us again. But it wasn't the patient quiet of hunting anymore. It was electric, charged, the kind of silence that hummed louder than any words. I stared out at the clearing, the sun now beginning to rise, light spilling across the frost. I tried to focus on the hunt, on the ritual I knew so well, but my mind replayed the feel of his chest against my back, his hands steadying mine, his whisper threading into me like a secret I couldn't shake. The woods were quiet, but the tension between us was deafening. By the time we made it back to camp, my nerves were frayed raw. The deer was long gone, the hunt a failure by any measure, but that wasn't what had my stomach in knots. It was the way he had pressed against me in the clearing, the way his whisper had tangled itself around my thoughts, the way I'd almost turned my head and let it happen. I busied myself with the fire, tossing logs into the pit and crouching low to strike a match, though my hands shook more than I wanted to admit. The flames caught quickly, licking at the wood with a hungry crackle. I sat back, staring into them as if they might swallow the memory of his breath against my ear. Behind me, I heard him moving, dropping his pack, unzipping it, pulling out food. The clatter of cans and utensils filled the silence, but underneath it I felt him. Felt his presence, his awareness, the same thick tension that had wrapped around us all morning. Finally, he spoke, his voice casual but edged with something sharper. "You're quiet. Just tired," I muttered. "Liar." I glanced up sharply, but he wasn't looking at me. He was crouched at the cooler, pulling out a package of meat. His lips curved in the faintest smirk. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. He straightened, turned toward me, and shrugged. "It means I know when something's eating at you, and right now it's pretty obvious." I looked back at the fire, jaw tight. "Maybe I just don't feel like talking. Or maybe you're afraid of saying the wrong thing." That made me freeze. My heart thudded, too loud, too fast. He'd hit too close to the truth, and the silence that followed was damning. He walked over, dropped into the chair across from me, and leaned back, stretching his legs out so casually it infuriated me. He opened a beer, took a sip, then fixed his gaze on me with infuriating patience. "So, what's going on in that head of yours?" I gripped my bottle tighter, the words clawing at my throat. I could have swallowed them again, could have buried them like I'd done last night, like I'd done all day, but something inside me snapped. The frustration, the tension, the ache of almost and not enough. It all surged up at once. "I like you." The words spilled out, raw and trembling. I stared at the fire, unable to meet his eyes. "I like you, but you're my son's friend, and I thought you were straight. So I've been trying to ignore it, to push it down. But," I broke off, shaking my head. "I can't anymore. Not after this morning." Silence. For a moment, I regretted every syllable, shame burning through me. I said too much. I'd ruined everything. Then his voice cut through the quiet, soft but steady. "What if I wasn't?" I looked up, stunned. His eyes were on me, steady, unflinching. "What?" I breathed. "What if I wasn't straight?" His tone carried no hesitation, no doubt. The words crashed through me like a wave, equal parts relief and disbelief. "You're serious?" He nodded once, lips curving into a small smile. "Dead serious." My chest tightened. Relief flooded me, but hesitation lingered. "But, my son, I know." He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, his voice low but firm. "He's your son. He's my friend. And that complicates things. I get it, but I've liked you for a long time. Longer than I should have. I was just waiting for a chance to see if you felt anything too." I stared at him, speechless. His honesty stripped me bare. There was no smirk now, no teasing grin, just truth. You've liked me?" "Yeah." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You think I came out here just for the hunt? Please, I wanted to be near you, alone, without him around. I needed to know if what I felt was just in my head." I exhaled, shaky, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. "You have no idea what you're saying." "Oh, I do." He tilted his head, eyes locking with mine. "And so do you." The fire popped between us, filling the silence that stretched long and heavy. My instincts screamed to back away, to retreat, to protect him, to protect myself. But my heart, God, my heart surged forward. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping back, and paced toward the edge of the camp. The woods loomed dark and endless, and I felt like I was standing at the edge of something just as vast. "I shouldn't," I muttered, my voice barely holding. "This is wrong." "Then why does it feel so right?" His words landed like a spark to dry tinder. I turned back, and there he was, standing now too, only a few feet away. The firelight danced across his face, his expression open, unguarded, waiting. I took a step toward him, then another. My pulse roared in my ears, my hands shaking at my sides. When I stopped in front of him, he didn't move away. He held his ground, eyes steady on mine, breathing slow and deliberate. "I don't know what happens after this," I whispered. "Neither do I," he said softly. "But I know what happens if we keep pretending." The distance between us was a breath, a heartbeat, a choice. I hesitated, God, I hesitated, because once we crossed it, there'd be no going back. Then he leaned in, just slightly, tilting his head. "Just tell me to stop," he murmured. Couldn't. Our lips met, tentative at first, barely a brush. My breath caught, my body tensed, the world narrowing to the single point of contact. It should have been small, uncertain, fleeting. But the second he pressed closer, the second his hand slid up to the back of my neck, every wall I'd built cracked wide open. The kiss deepened, hesitant giving way to hungry, cautious giving way to undeniable. My hands found his shoulders, gripping tight, pulling him closer as if I'd been starving for this all along. When we finally pulled apart, gasping softly, our foreheads rested together. His smile was shaky, but his eyes burned with certainty. "See," he whispered, "you're not as careful as you think." I laughed, breathless, half in disbelief, half in awe. God help me, I murmured. What have we done? He brushed his thumb along my jaw, still close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. Exactly what we were supposed to. And in that moment, under the stars with the fire crackling low, I believed him. For a long moment after that first kiss, neither of us moved. The fire burned low, throwing shadows that flickered across his face, but all I could see were his eyes, bright, steady, and filled with something that made my chest ache. I could have pulled away. I could have told him it was a mistake, could have buried it like I had every feeling before. But when his hand slid down my arm, fingers curling around mine with such quiet certainty, the dam inside me broke. I can't pretend anymore, I whispered, the words shaking but real. His lips curved into a smile that wasn't cocky or playful, just relieved. He squeezed my hand gently, as if to say finally. We stood there by the fire, holding on like the world might slip away if we let go. Then he leaned in again, and this time there was no hesitation. Our mouths met fully, hungrily, as if the restraint of the past day had been kindling waiting for a match. His hand cupped the back of my neck, drawing me closer, while mine slid to his waist, pulling him against me until I could feel the rhythm of his heartbeat matching mine. The kiss was heat and softness all at once. Urgent, yes, but never rushed. He tasted faintly of beer and smoke, his breath warm against me, his lips parting as if he'd been waiting years for this moment. Maybe he had. When we finally broke apart, gasping softly, I laughed, low, disbelieving, a little unsteady. God, this feels impossible. Feels real, he countered, pressing his forehead to mine. Don't fight it. I didn't. We drifted toward the fire pit again, sinking down onto the blanket we'd tossed earlier for sitting. The flames had dwindled to glowing embers, their light soft, intimate. He lay back, tugging me gently down beside him. The ground was cold, but with him pressed against me, it didn't matter. We kissed again, slower this time, savoring instead of rushing. His hand slipped into mine, fingers weaving together like it was the most natural thing in the world. The touch wasn't just about want, it was about trust. I rolled onto my side to face him, our noses brushing, our breaths mingling. The stars stretched endless above us, but my whole universe had narrowed to this boy, no, this man, who had somehow turned my world upside down in less than 2 days. I shouldn't want this, I murmured against his lips. But you do, he replied, his voice quiet but sure. And so do I. Something about the way he said it, without shame, without apology, settled deep in my chest. For once, I stopped fighting myself. I leaned in, kissing him again, letting my hands slide along his jaw, the stubble rough under my fingertips. He sighed into my mouth, tilting his head to deepen it, his body pressing closer until we fit together like puzzle pieces. The night stretched on in a blur of touches and whispers. We didn't rush, didn't cross lines we couldn't uncross. Instead, we explored the edges of what we both wanted. Hands lingering on shoulders, fingers tracing the slope of a chest, lips brushing across cheeks and temples and throats. Every touch was a discovery, every sigh a revelation. At one point, he pulled back just enough to study me in the faint firelight. You don't have to be scared, he said softly. I'm not scared of you, I admitted. I'm scared of how much I already feel. He smiled, tender and unguarded, and leaned in to kiss me again, slower, deeper, like he was trying to show me I didn't need to fear it. Eventually, we settled into the silence, lying side by side beneath the stars, my arm curled around him, his head resting against my shoulder. The forest hummed around us, crickets chirping, leaves rustling in the night breeze. But for me, time had slowed to the steady beat of his heart against mine. We talked in low murmurs, words spilling out in the quiet way they do when walls have finally crumbled. He told me about nights he'd sat awake wondering if he'd ever be brave enough to admit what he felt. I told him about years of burying parts of myself, convincing myself it was too late to want something different. It's not just attraction, is it? I asked finally, almost afraid of the answer. He shifted to look at me, his eyes dark and honest in the starlight. "No," he said firmly. "It's not. I wouldn't risk this if it was just that." The certainty in his voice unraveled something tight inside me. I pressed a kiss to his forehead, closing my eyes. Then I guess neither of us has to pretend anymore. We lay there until the embers cooled, until the night wrapped us in its quiet blessing. And though the world beyond the woods would be complicated, even messy, in that moment there was only truth. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was love breaking through fear. Love that had waited in silence until we finally had the courage to choose it. The first light of morning slipped through the trees, pale and gentle, pulling me awake. My body ached from the cold ground, but when I shifted, I felt the weight of him still tucked against me, his breath warm against my chest. For a moment, I just lay there, listening to the forest waking, the birdsong, the rustle of leaves, and the steady rhythm of his breathing. Awkwardness should have been the first thing I felt. Regret, even. But instead, all I felt was relief. A strange, impossible relief that I didn't have to pretend anymore. When he stirred, blinking up at me with a half-sleepy smile, I couldn't help chuckling. "Morning, morning," he echoed, his voice rough from sleep. He shifted, stretching his arms before rolling onto his back with a groan. "God, I think that ground left bruises." I laughed softly. "Told you a cabin bed would have been better. And missed that sky?" He gestured up at the canopy, where the sunlight filtered in shafts of gold. "Not a chance." There it was again, that mix of boyish charm and stubborn confidence that always disarmed me. I shook my head, still smiling. We both sat up, brushing dirt and leaves from our clothes, the remnants of the night lingering in the quiet glances we traded. Neither of us rushed to speak about it, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was different now, lighter, easier. Back at the cabin, we moved around each other with a rhythm that felt new but natural. Packing gear, folding blankets, cooling the fire pit. It was all routine, yet every small brush of his hand, every glance, carried a current underneath. At one point, as I reached for the cooler, his hand grazed mine deliberately. He looked up with a grin. "Still distracted?" he teased. "More than you'll ever know," I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. He laughed, shaking his head, but there was a softness in his eyes, something that said he'd been waiting to hear me say it. Once the truck was loaded, we stood there for a moment, looking at the cabin as if leaving it meant stepping back into reality. I shoved my hands into my pockets, unsure how to put any of it into words. He solved it for me. "We don't have to rush," he said quietly, his gaze steady on mine. "But we also don't have to hide. Not from each other." I nodded slowly, the knot in my chest loosening. "I went hunting with my son's friend," I murmured, almost to myself. Then I looked at him, really looked, and smiled. But what I found was something I didn't know I needed. His grin widened, and before I could overthink it, he leaned in and kissed me again. Quick, sure, enough to send a warmth through me that no fire could match. The drive home was quiet in the best way. The road stretched out ahead, winding through fields and hills, sunlight spilling across the windshield. He leaned back in the seat, humming softly to a song on the radio, his eyes closed like he'd finally found peace. At one point, his hand slid across the seat, resting lightly on my thigh. It wasn't bold, wasn't a claim, just a touch, simple and steady. I glanced at him, but he didn't open his eyes. He didn't need to. That touch said everything. We didn't know what came next. The world outside those woods would be complicated. But as I drove, his hand warm on me, I knew one thing for certain. We'd stopped pretending, and that was enough. If you were in my shoes, caught between fear and the chance for love, would you have taken that risk? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories like this.